and one form of violence can be no means of solution to another form of violence. I agree with Amnesty International when it ambiguously states that capital punishment is the most inhumane and degrading punishment, like almost committing the same violence the state otherwise condemns. Moreover, every act of capital punishment reveals our collective failure, our inability to work with the rapist or the murderer or the terrorist, understand his inner turmoil, heal his wound self through a mix of isolation, careful observation, education, counseling, and life affirming labor. In fact, like rape and murder, every act of capital punishment reveals a moral failure of civilization. My second argument is factual, as many studies have shown the death penalty does not deter crimes as any more effectively than other punishment. In fact, crime figures in countries like Denmark, Norway, and Netherlands, which have abolished the death penalty, have not risen. However, in India, as the annual statistics report indicates, at the end of 23, 561 prisoners were living under the sentence of death, but there are more than 31,000 reported rape cases every year in India. Moreover, death penalty is disproportionately applied to people who are poor and marginalized, as A.P. Shah, a former Chief Justice of Delhi High Court, said in an interview with Amnesty. The poor and downtrodden get the death penalty, and one hardly finds a rich or affluent person going to the gallows. And finally, my third argument is that while it satisfies those who demand instant justice, it diverts our attention from the real task at hand, resting the normalization of a culture that promotes brute and toxic masculinity and objectification of women. In a society where on average there are 86 incidents of rape every day, we need to go beyond the instant fulfillment of justice through capital punishment and instead work rigorously in the domain of culture, socialization, and education. Only then it will be possible for us to create a society in which young boys refuse to dance to repulsive pop songs like Main Hoon, etc. on streets. Resisting the normalization of a culture that promotes brute and toxic masculinity and objectification of women. In a society where on average there are 86 incidents of rape every day, we need to go beyond the instant fulfillment of justice through capital punishment and instead work rigorously in the domain of culture, civilization, and education. Trump 2.0 has reignited conversations on H-1B visa within the US and abroad. Will changes to the US immigration system benefit or hurt workers or economies? H-1B visa is designed to exploit workers. It enables corporate America to take advantage of migrants and snub American workers. H-1B uncertainty fuels jobs in India. I was once a H-1B worker, neither the best nor the brightest. I had failed the entrance exam for the Indian Institute of Technology. I had failed it to make it the second rung of the prestigious colleges. I had failed, like many young Indians. I wasn't passionate about engineering, yet pressured by the herd. I revered technical concepts like my dharma, the thought of choice and freedom. Sorry, what choice, what freedom? I had none, and it didn't bother me. So when I secured an H-1B visa, the reserved for the best and brightest techies, I felt proud I had finally been chosen. I soon met with a college acquaintance, let's call him Vishal, who had founded a job at my company as an IT consultant. Hired by the mom and pop IT body shop, Vishal has embellished his resume with 6 years of experience. Every day at lunch, he described his deceits, how he deflected, yet another task, how he contrived yet another excuse, how he survived yet another day. It felt like talking to a corporate spy or watching a real life web series. Every lunchtime a new episode. Once Vishal had to interview two IT professionals in India. How did he know what to ask? Simple Google search. What about selecting the right applicant? I flipped the coin. His manager in the US, an Indian man, once asked him, do you have the experience listed on your resume, Vishal froze. The US has thousands of IT body shops owned by Indians, luring Indians that force their employees to fake resumes, arrange proxy interviews, Photoshop immigration documents, pay visa fees, sign coercive contracts, and much more. Besides relinquishing their identities such as H-1Bs, languished in squalid guest houses, battle harrowing debts, face deportation threats, and earn nothing when they don't have clients. In fact, they pay their employers taxes to meet the rules of H-1B program. The 18th century has returned. Indians have been enslaved by a company, this time by fellow Indians in a foreign land. Vishal struggled and survived and flourished. My American colleagues lost their jobs in a series of layoffs. Corporate America's cruelty made me restless, even though my employer treated me well. Unlike Vishal's, the H-1B program had shackled me. If I got fired, I only get a few weeks to find work to maintain my immigration status. When my firm applied for a green card, it deterred me from taking a new job as it would reset the decades long waiting period. I wasn't myself in the US, I wasn't allowed to be. My quest for dignity had made me a pawn. So, after dreading and planning for a year, I quit my job, flew to Mumbai, and darted like a madman, a free man, to my latest latent romance film writing. 3 dreamy years later, in 2016, I began working on a non-fiction book. The idea had come to me in a blink, the abuse of the H-1B program. I realized that corporate America had concealed the H-1B scam, real H-1B scam with great ingenuity, diverting our attention to a scam with a scam. Professor Norman Matloff, who had researched the guest worker program for over 3 decades and testified before Congress, called it the Intel Gods Infosys bad myth and racial scapegoating. The visa abuse also implicates American firms. Their record of suppressing wages and favoring H-1Bs over Americans is well documented in news articles, research papers, and court cases. What worse, it's legal. So Elon Musk is flat out wrong when he says H-1B program is broken. Isn't says H-1B program is broken. It's functioning as intended, permitting corporations to underpay foreign workers, snub American professionals, and mint money. The H-1B Visa Reform Act of 2004, for instance, restructured the salary slab, inserting two wage levels at 34th and 50 percentiles of salaries surveyed for an occupation in an area. The Department of Labor even allows firms to set the prevailing wage levels laced with loopholes. They enable companies to steal wages while complying with the law. The Musk-MAGA clash has revealed two contentious issues: that US suffers from a STEM crisis and that racial bias drives all H-1B critics. Both notions are false. The endemic problem of fake resumes itself, which I found during my reporting and research, negates many H-1B's best and the brightest tags. The, Pro- the Provisa camp also cites a low employment figure to render American techies irrelevant, but a paper by the Bureau of Labor Statistics researcher Caroline Guarneri posited that a computer science field ejecting countless programmers made the employment rate meaningless. So, a former engineer, now a sales clerk at a Radio Shack, summarized Matloff countered as an employee salesperson, not an unemployed engineer. In the late 1980s, the National Science Foundation produced a flawed study on the imminent STEM crisis that sparked a congressional probe and influenced excellence in mathematics. Why did the act matter? It created the H-1B program, has revealed two contentious issues: that US suffers from a STEM crisis and that bias drives all the H-1B critics. Both notions are false. The endemic problem of fake resumes itself, which I found during my reporting and research, negates many H-1B's best and the brightest tags. The Provisa camp also cites a low unemployment figure to render American techies is irrelevant, but a paper by Bureau and Labor Statistics researcher posits that computer science field ejecting countless programmers made the unemployment rate meaningless. So, former engineer, now sales clerk, summarized as an employed salesperson, not an unemployed engineer. H-1B uncertainty fuels jobs in India. Ambiguity or immigration has unintended consequences. US firms have been quick to shift hiring to other countries. Over the last decade, debates on immigration policy have become central feature of politics in advanced economies, including US, UK, and Germany. Historically, such debates focused on low-skilled workers. As US President assumes office, the spotlight has moved to high-skilled workers. The US H-1B program is a temporary non-immigrant visa program. The US H-1B program is a temporary non-immigrant visa program that allows employers in the country to hire foreign workers in specialized fields such as technology, engineering, finance. Due to a high demand and a cap of 65,000 per year, a computerized lottery selects applicants. Existing evidence shows that immigration can benefit both the sending and the host country. For instance, the IT boom in the US led to an increase in the acquisition of computer science skills among Indian students, according to the research by Gaurav Khanna and Nicholas Moral. The resultant brain gain, coupled with the return of STEM migrants from the US due to circulation, provided critical human capital boost to the Indian IT industry. Not surprisingly, several CEOs of the India's successful startups have spent a significant time in the US honing their business and technological expertise before bringing their knowledge and skills back to India. For the US, as the CEOs of the top tech firms are emphasizing, the need of the H-1B program arises to attract skilled workers and address skill shortages in the country. However, some Trump supporters are suggesting a clampdown and reform of the program, claiming that foreign workers displace American employees at lower wages. Similar discussions on H-1B visa abuse constituted as a part of Trump's rhetoric in 2016. Despite no change in visa quotas or regulations, uncertainty among immigration policy soared right before the US 2016 elections. According to the Economic Policy Uncertainty Index, migration related uncertainty tripled following Trump's primary victory compared to 2015. The consequences of the rise in uncertainty rippled across global labor markets, particularly in India, which supplies 70% of H-1B workers annually. Economic theory suggests that uncertainty makes firms more cautious, often leading to delays in investment. Since the H-1B visa process involves significant upfront cost, including legal fees, administrative work, and relocation expenses, it is expected that firms would delay hiring the H-1B workers until the uncertainty is resolved. Under such circumstances, firms are likely to explore alternative strategies, including relocating jobs overseas to mitigate these risks. Our research, Ritam Chaure, Kanika Mahajan, and Shekhar Tumar looks at the impact of the rise in immigration policy uncertainty in 2016 on firm level demand for workers using data from a leading job platform in India. It offers critical lessons from the current period. India, as the latest source of H-1B workers, was uniquely impacted by this shift. Our analysis reveals that job postings for US based positions dropped by 15% almost immediately after Trump's primary win. Simultaneously, it led to a significant rise in India based job postings by the firms most affected by the uncertainty. We find that firms with 10 percentage point higher reliance on H-1B workers increased India-based postings by 11%. For an average firm posting ads for US-based positions, this translated to 16 additional India-based positions and 4 fewer US-based ones. This highlights how immigration policy uncertainty can quickly reshape global hiring patterns. We also find that this increase in India based postings was not on account of firms creating new roles in India, but rather relocating positions originally based in the US. Jobs most vulnerable to offshoring, such as IT and software, saw a largest increase in India. India's service exports rose significantly for most more H-1B reliant firms during this period, suggesting that these offshoreable jobs were moved to India. India headquartered firms were twice as likely as the US headquartered counterparts to relocate positions back to India. One of the most striking aspects of our study is the role of uncertainty in changing firm hiring decisions. Despite no changes to the H-1B visa program during the initial period, firms preemptively adjusted their hiring strategies. When Trump administration made the H-1B process more strenuous in March 2017, we find that effect of uncertainty in 2016 was almost two-thirds as large as the impact of these actual policy changes. Netaji's last journey, my father Subhash Chandra Bose, was willing to risk everything for India's freedom. He must be allowed to return to his country posthumously. Anita Bose Pfaff. On August 18, 1945, 3 days after the end of the World War II in the Eastern Theatre of War, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose died during a plane crash at Taipei, then occupied by Japan. His remains were cremated there and taken to Tokyo. The community of Indian exiles who had made their home there arranged for the urn to be kept hidden from the US occupation forces at Renkoji Temple temporarily, maybe a few months or a few years at the most. Today, almost 80 years later, and more than 77 years after India became independent, Netaji's remains are still honored at Renkoji Temple. The third generation head priest exercises this function. At the time of Netaji's death, shortly thereafter, a large part of the world was in a total upheaval. Communication was archaic compared to today's standards. There were several parties interested in ascertaining what happened to Netaji. Did he really die? Or did he manage an adventurous escape once again, as twice before from India in disguise in 1941 and from Germany submarine 1943? But the investigations carried out shortly after the accident were kept classified for many decades. Not surprisingly, various speculations about what might have happened to him on or after August 18, 1945 made the rounds. Over time, the result of earlier investigations were declassified and further inquiry commissions were set up, three alone in 1956, 79, and 1999, by the various Indian governments. 10 reports concluded that Netaji died during the night of August 18 following a plane crash in Taipei. Only the last Indian inquiry by the Justice Mukherjee Commission arrived at inconclusive results, but this report from some strange reasons contains many mistakes, inconsistencies, and incorrect statements. When asked about the errors in personal conversation with the members of Netaji family, Justice Mukherjee admitted the fact that he was not willing to talk about it. We must therefore accept that fact of Netaji's death despite a variety of fantastic speculations of what might or could now have happened. While for some of these speculations may be motivated by genuine affection for an iconic leader, let us not forget that an author can also make a lot of money by publishing stories of mysterious occurrences. And mysterious mysteries may offer more entertaining reading than dry reports or academic treatises on the subject. Many Japanese governments and Japanese admirers of Netaji wanted the Indian government and his family to take custody of Netaji's remains and in his motherland, India. In the 1990s, Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao and his Foreign Minister, later Rashtrapati Pranab Mukherjee, with the support of Netaji's widow and his daughter, initiated a return of leaders' remains. However, before this could be achieved, their government fell and the following government abandoned the idea and accepted the request of other followers and family members to set up Justice Mukherjee Commission in 1999. Like having Netaji's remains handed over to by the Japanese government could not be to their advantage. They would have be prepared for controversy between followers and family members who were convinced of Netaji's death in 1945 and those who were not. After all, one cannot blame politicians dependent on support of voters for not willingly placing themselves in the middle of unnecessary controversy. The fact that Netaji's brother Suresh Chandra Bose, as a member of the first Indian investigation into his brother's death, had initialed the draft report concluding Netaji's death in 1945, but then submitted a dissenting report, led to the additional controversies. Meanwhile, after all relevant documents about Netaji's death have been made available to the public. The evidence in support of the fact and the date of his death is overwhelming. While the first government of Prime Minister when the first government of Prime Minister Narendra Modi declassified the latest Indian documents pertaining to Netaji and his family, and class Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee did the same in Bengal. Persons in doubt who had hoped that something might be found in these documents had to accept that no conspiracy had been hushed up. Netaji was deeply devoted to his motherland and his compatriots. He was willing to sacrifice everything to see India free. Since this was not achieved during his lifetime, he deserves to be allowed to return to his country at least posthumously. Indian refiners seek more West Asian oil amid US sanctions on Russian oil trade. The sweeping package announced earlier this month by the US against Russian oil trade has already had an impact on near term supply of Russian oil to Indian refiners who are finding hard to secure enough cargoes for Moscow's crude. The situation is forcing Indian refiners to look elsewhere, mainly to West Asia, to replace volumes from Russia, currently India's largest source market for crude. India's second largest public sector refiner, Bharat Petroleum, is unable to get sufficient cargoes of Russian oil for March delivery, the company's director said. Crude availability is not an issue, only the commercial benefits of Russian crude may not be available, Gupta said. Boost household income, simplify indirect taxes, and put conditions on capex loans to state and support MSMEs. The first full year budget of the new government comes against the backdrop of slower domestic economic growth and a weakening currency and a highly uncertain global geopolitical situation, especially the Trump led US administration. Not surprisingly, then, the expectations are running high, below RMI 5 expectations from the Union Government Budget 25-26. Make interest free capex loans to states conditional. One of the most worrying trends in public finances in the recent past has been the increasing number of welfare schemes. The Union government announced PM Kisan scheme in the interim budget, which was followed up by free food grains of about 81 crore citizens and was extended to 5 years in November 23. Notwithstanding the prosperous India, several states have announced unconditional monthly stipends to various groups, women, students, and unemployed, without any economic criteria or statistical reasoning. This followed farm loan waivers announced by several states post 2019. All these trends are best confusing because if the states have the resources to announce such cash transfers or other welfare schemes, then the need for interest-free loans for capex to states by central government must be reviewed. It would be useful to link such capex loans with some conditions, the achievement of capex by each state versus its budget estimate, the ratio of the welfare scheme cash transfer current expenditure to current expenditure of each state. It would be useful to link such capex loan with some conditions of the achievement of capex by each state, the ratio of welfare schemes or cash transfer current expenditure to capital expenditure of each state. The higher the former, the lower the latter, the more the state deserves capex support from the central government. Change dividend income tax policy and commit to lowering simplifying indirect taxes. There is no doubt that personal income tax rates are high, but the burden of indirect taxes is more widening and concerning. Based on the central government, uh, group taxes, direct personal tax account for uh, 57% of the taxes. Focus on boosting household income, not consumption. Remain on the path of fiscal consolidation and focus on capex. The government should accept its limitations in incentivizing corporate investments. India poised to lead in AI, sustained 6 to 8% economic growth, says IT Minister. Market slide 12% crash in last 4 months leave investors taken. Unconstitutional federal judge halts Trump's bid to end birthright citizenship. New wildfire near LA. In hiding, Bangla Awami top brass connect with Hasina, wait for rule of law to return. A third of leadership in prison, a third outside country, a third hiding at home. Ex-ministers, ex-MPs, ministers tells the Indian Express. Prime Minister Narendra Modi interacts with students after paying tribute to Netaji Subhash Bose on his birth anniversary at Central Hall on Old Parliament Building on Thursday. On new ISRO's chief table, 100th launched this month, PS will be built by private sector. Musgao ThyssenKrupp likely to get a 70,000 crore submarine deal. Defense Ministry find joint bid by L&T Navantia non-feasible. Jharkhand government reinstates IS officer released on bail. BJP slams Congress. So that's all for today. See you in the next one.